VR plagued by single-player experiences, it's always nice to know a new multiplayer experience is on the horizon, and wave shooters seem to be an obvious multiplayer choice. This takes me right into my review of Dick Wilde 2 by Wilde Games. After a toxic outbreak plagues the swamplands and city sewer systems, it's up to you and an arsenal of handcrafted weaponry to battle against these mutated creatures. And with that, let's get into it. Without question, one of Dick Wilde 2's biggest selling points has to be in its multiplayer, as you're now able to pair up with a buddy to protect these swampy ravines. Wilde Games added an additional perk allowing crossplay between major platform VR headsets. This is something we don't see often enough, so it's always a huge plus to see this added freedom to a game. The gameplay in Dick Wilde 2 is familiar, with mechanics very similar to its predecessor. And of course, this isn't necessarily a bad thing, as the mechanics offer a solid shooting gallery style, and they work very well using either a dual move controller combo or the aim. Tracking is smooth, and each controller scheme responds well. Naturally, the aim controller is my preferred method of madness. Dick Wilde 2 offers several new additions to spruce up the gameplay as well. A wealth of additional weapons can be unlocked by completing challenges for each one, new hats for your characters can be selected to spruce up your look, and your raft is no longer stagnant as you drift from one checkpoint to the next, defending yourself from each new wave of enemies. As far as wave shooters are concerned, Dick Wilde 2 has a lot going for it, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention some of the issues that I had while playing. Naturally, I wanted my first experience in Dick Wilde 2 to be in the multiplayer, and so I paired up with that guy as well VR to get a good taste of what this was like. An issue that we noticed after about 2 hours of gameplay was that the game seemed extremely easy. We had little to no difficulty at all, and this was without using any special power-ups and even basic weapon types through the majority of our playthrough. This unengaging but manageable gameplay suddenly took a turn for the worse. There came a point somewhere in World 2 where we were unable to continue due to the sudden ramp up in difficulty. Naturally, this was a bit of a relief and a frustration all at once. On one hand, we were actually happy to see the words "Game Over" appear on the screen, or at least I was. On the other hand, it seemed like we went from easy to expert from one level to the next. I may be being a bit dramatic here, but that is kind of the effect that it left on me. The difficulty seemed to have no gradual increase, but instead was more like being thrown from a cliff. Since my initial playthrough, Wilde Games had announced a patch that would address some of these issues. However, after recognizing this change, I went back to test it again, and the issues still persisted. Another issue I personally took was with the pace of your raft. I realized that having movement is a step up from the previous installment of Dick Wilde, but the pace of the raft was incredibly slow, often reminding me of scenery-based rides you may have seen from Disneyland. It was always incredibly noticeable when completing a run from one checkpoint to the next. Enemies would stop approaching your raft too early, and the remaining slow and tedious drift to the stopping point was honestly a bit aggravating. While I understand that the pace is designed to help combat motion sickness for those susceptible, it would have been nice to have more options to speed up the raft. I know that that's a logistical issue that I'm probably oversimplifying, but I digress. I also would have really enjoyed more intense whitewater rafting type moments, but that is more of a suggestion than anything, as the core of Dick Wilde 2's gameplay hinges on its gunplay. As always, I played Dick Wilde 2 on a base PS4, and the graphics look solid for what it was boasting. While textures surrounding you are relatively simple, weapon models are both comical and well done, and enemy designs, especially those that lunge at you, had a great look to them. Ultimately, the game has a simple cartoony style that isn't going to wow anyone, but does create the perfect environment for what the game has to offer. Honestly, it's hard to recommend this title for its VR experience. While VR always helps in shooting galleries, adding depth perception to a varying ranged challenge, playing on a flat screen with only move controllers seems like it may offer the same level of enjoyment. It's obviously hard to say this with utter confidence, but with all the issues I mentioned before with Dick Wilde 2, it's hard to recommend as a VR experience. While multiplayer does offer some fun and some laughs with a friend, Dick Wilde 2 may have missed the mark here. In a VR marketplace saturated with wave shooter after wave shooter, Dick Wilde 2 sizes up to be exactly that. Another wave shooter.